The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Monday, November 17th. I hope everybody is ready for the week. And we'll be doing shows most of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe Thursday. I don't think so. I think I've got a interview on Thursday with a New Zealand, some show in New Zealand. So I have to do it at 2 p.m. my time, which is like 8 a.m. their time or something ridiculous, the following day. So it's some crazy thing, and then I'm on a flight. So no show Thursday, probably no show Friday, no show Saturday, Sunday. So Monday will be the next show after that. So just to give you a heads up. All right, let's jump in to the news. We got kind of a lot of items, none of them super in depth, but a lot of them a lot of stuff happening. We'll start with our favorite topic, the topic that we keep coming back to because it is, after all, I'm not going to New Zealand, Michael. We're doing it. That's why there's a time difference. We're doing it via the internet, that thing called the internet. So I'm talking about DEI and merit in hiring on New Zealand television. I'm debating some other guests. I'd love to go to New Zealand. New Zealand is one of my favorite places on planet Earth. So, if anybody can arrange for me a talk in New Zealand, I'm ready to go. So do it. Yeah, let's get me to New Zealand. I'm eager. All right. So tariffs, our favorite topic, Trump's favorite topic. We keep coming back to it because it's continuously in the news, and Trump keeps bringing it into the news one way or the other. Anyway, end of last week, there was this story that came out that MAGA and Trump just jumped on. I mean, it made their day. It was so exciting. They were so thrilled. This is the headline. Fed study vindicates Trump trade policy. Fed study vindicates Trump trade policy. 150 years of evidence shows tariffs lower inflation. I mean, this is amazing. Amazing. A sweeping new analysis of tariff policy, spanning 150 years, suggests that the economic establishment may have fundamentally misunderstood how tariffs affect prices and employment. A finding with profound implications for understanding President Donald Trump's trade policy and proper response by the Federal Reserve. Researchers at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco examined major tariff changes from 1870 through 2020 across the United States and the United Kingdom and France. Their conclusion challenges the conventional wisdom that dominated economic policy debates in recent years. When countries raise tariffs, prices actually fall, not rise. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to doubt the empirical prowess of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco and its researchers. So what the hell is going on? Have I been lying to you all these years, and it's been years, by telling you that tariffs raise prices, hurt the economy, do bad stuff? No. What is and a bunch of people, by the way, retweeted this study, and it went all out, and people were thumping their chest, and this is amazing, and this is great. What actually happens? What is actually going on here? So it does show the tariffs, over the long run, reduce inflation, not immediately, but over a longer period of time, actually reduce prices. Why do they reduce prices? Because they dramatically reduce economic activity. They reduce employment. And as employment goes down and economic activity goes down, people have less money and they basically can afford and buy fewer things. There's less demand and prices will generally go down. So they go up when tariffs are first introduced. Then the economy suffers and then prices go down a little bit. So, yeah, if what you care about is not sheer prices, right? But what you care about is prosperity, well-being, economic well-being, then tariffs are an awful idea. Tariffs seem to be anti-inflationary because they result in a weak economy, right? So when the economy goes down, prices are not going to go up. Think about, one of the big examples of this, and this is not always causal, right? This is the problem with empirical studies. You have to differentiate causality. But think about Smoot-Hawley, which was passed, I think, what was it, 1930? So it was passed during the Great Depression. So the Great Depression, you get the stock market collapse, you get a recession, taxes are raised, all this stuff. It's becoming a depression. Banks are collapsing. And then, so demand is collapsing. And then you increase tariffs. Well, yeah, tariffs are not going to raise prices because demand is collapsing around you. So tariffs didn't cause the collapse in demand in that case. It coincided with the collapse in demand. And that's what the study shows. Tariffs, like any tax, reduce economic growth. If you dramatically increase the corporate tax or the income tax or any tax, it will have similar effects. Economic growth will go down, unemployment will go up, and prices at the margin will go down because people will have less money to spend. I don't know, why, I guess I don't know why this is so hard. Right? So, yeah. Tariffs are bad. They're bad. They might not be bad for prices in the long run because they're bad for other stuff that happens to reduce prices along the way. But you just can't, you can't get around the fact that tariffs are taxes. And taxes reduce activity. Whatever you tax, you get less of. Here you're taxing consumption. You get less of that. Maybe that's a good thing for some of you. Maybe you think that's a good thing. It's a good thing if it's the only, if you can at the same time reduce taxes on, first of all, if you tax all consumption, not just consumption that comes from overseas, thus distorting the market. But if, as you tax consumption, I'm all for consumption taxes, if at the same time you get rid of income taxes. But that is not happening, will not happen. There's no way for that to happen. The consumption tax needs to be fairly high, and it can't just be tariffs. It has to be on all goods. And if they did on all goods, then yeah, okay. I'm willing to replace the income tax with the sales tax. I think that would actually have positive economic implications. But then, over the weekend, and really he's floated this before, we've talked about this, Trump offered, again, his so-called tariff dividend. I mean, he came out and said, he literally said this on Air Force One, he said, the tariff allows us to give a dividend if we want to do that. We're going to be doing a dividend, which people will enjoy and spend and do what they want. But we're also going to be reducing debt very substantially. Reducing debt very substantially. By the way, he promised this in his first term, and debt only increased dramatically in his first term. But let's remind everybody, because you probably need reminders, debt is increasing every single day. It's increasing at an annual rate of $1.8 trillion. $1.8 trillion, just debt. Which means, the current total debt that we have is something like 37, 38 trillion. We're increasing that by 1.8 every year. And of course, because we have to pay interest on that, that is likely to increase. And there's no plan in Congress. We know what Doge did, bupkis, nothing. As I predicted, did nothing. And the reality is that we're seeing, debt. We're seeing that there's no plan anyway to reduce spending or to increase taxes, other than tariffs. But the increase in taxes off of tariffs is not big enough. It's just not enough revenue. And the reality is that the $1.8 trillion is after you take into account the increased revenue from tariffs. So it's complete fantasy. So that is not being reduced at all. At all, never mind, as he says, very substantially. It's not even reduced a little bit. Indeed, debt is increasing dramatically, substantially, every single day, every single moment that the government is open, that the government is spending money. There's no tariff surplus. We raise taxes, more revenue is coming into the government, but not enough to close the deficit. David said I should trademark trillion. I think so too. That should be my thing, trillion. Now, what happens if you do $2,000 per person? I haven't run the math on how much debt that would increase. But the reality is that, maybe tariffs are $300 billion. So again, 1.9 trillion, 1.8 trillion, 1.9 trillion, something like that. Trillion, not any trillion, just trillion. And he wants to then pass out 2,000 each. And what will that do? That'll increase the debt, so the debt will no longer be 1.8 trillion, the deficit. The deficit will now increase to 1.8 trillion plus $2,000 times however many people get a check, which is hundreds of billions of dollars. So it will be over 2 trillion. And if you send everybody a check, if you literally take on debt, borrow money, and then give people a check in the mail for them to go on and spend the money on stuff, what do you get? What did we learn during the COVID stimulus that happens when you send everybody a check, when you deposit money in people's bank accounts to spend? You get price inflation. You get increases in prices. People take that money and they go consume. I mean, the stupidity, sorry, but I'm just giving you what do you call it? What do you call it? A microaggression, warning. Microaggression warning. You might be microaggressed. I said years and years ago that this president's understanding of economics is that of a 5-year-old, and I've been chided for that, and I've been told I shouldn't do that. But the reality is that he reinforces that every single day. Every single day, you hear something coming out of his mouth that is unbelievably economically ignorant. And, he just has an understanding of economics that is of a 5-year-old. That's just the reality. people around him sell their souls to stay around him because they know better. Did you see the Treasury Secretary Bessent go on television and tell the American people that the reason beef prices are going up is because illegal immigrants crossed the border with their diseased cows. And those diseased cows have infected American cows. And they're all dying. And as a consequence, there's less beef. And as a consequence, prices are going up. I didn't realize, and maybe you didn't realize this either, that illegal immigrants were crossing in from the border with cows. I mean, how absurd, ridiculous, stupid is that? I mean, they can barely make it across themselves. And those cows are not deported? I mean, he literally said this. I saw the video of him saying this on Fox. It's, of course, so here's the point. J.D. Vance is going on TV telling you that home prices are higher, that high home prices are the consequence of illegal immigrants. Of course, crime is increasing somewhere, I guess, because of illegal immigrants. And of course, you're paying higher beef prices because of illegal immigrants. These people, think we're stupid. First of all, they are sick, but they think we're stupid. Every problem in America, which is, I guess we are stupid, because the reality is this is the campaign Donald Trump ran in 2015 and now. Every problem in America can be reduced to one source. Every problem that you have in your personal life, the fact that you don't have a job, the fact that you cannot get health insurance, the fact that you can't get a home, the fact that your beef prices are going up, all these things and more. Crime, everything, every problem in America today is caused by, yes, you guessed it, illegal immigrants. But we're not xenophobic or anything like that. It's just a fact. Just look at the numbers. So yeah, this is where we are. Bessent really said this, and he's smart. He I think he sometimes gets into a corner during an interview, and he just doesn't know where to go with it, and so he makes shit up. He just makes it up on the spot. I can't imagine he thinks this in advance. He just comes out, and he's probably super embarrassed afterwards. Yeah, somebody says, Ike says it's the new Jews. Yes, and I said this in 2015. I told you this exactly. I said Trump's campaign is all based on the idea that all your problems, every single problem that you have, is caused by the other. The other. And since it's not politically correct, at least it wasn't in 2015, to name the other as the Jew, which is what they've done in Europe for hundreds of years, we'll use illegal immigrants or immigrants more broadly as the cause, or Chinese or whatever, right? But immigrants. Yeah, yes, this has been evident now for 9 years, 2025, 10 years. 10 years this has been going up. And he keeps doing it because it works politically, because it's easy for the I guess throngs of mindless Americans to say, yeah, illegal immigrants, they're the problem. They're the ones harass, they're the ones destroying our economy, destroying our world. It's not. Tariffs couldn't be tariffs. There's no way it's tariffs. That is not destroying anything. One other thing that came out when was this? Friday? Or maybe earlier today. Is about this reindustrialization of America. You remember that? We were going to reindustrialize. Tariffs were going to make things so expensive, we stopped buying them, and therefore companies would have to start building them in America. So we would have this huge increase in building factories and manufacturing, and we would have a renaissance in manufacturing and a massive growth in industrialization, reindustrialization. Well, I mean, according to the Southern Business and Development Project, right, the Southern Business and Development, I guess it's a newspaper, a business publication. Project activity, that is activity of building manufacturing plants in 2025 has been the worst in its 31 years of covering manufacturing and plant expansion. It's actually construction. It's actual construction of new manufacturing facilities. It doesn't include AI, because that's not manufacturing, is at the lowest it's been since they started measuring this 31 years ago. I don't know. I guess maybe some of us economists were right. Maybe. I mean, I shouldn't call myself an economist. Maybe some of those smart economists were right. Maybe economics has some use, some valid. Sometimes it's right. And on top of that, according to ISM, the ISM Manufacturing Index, which is an index of manufacturing in the United States, it has now fallen to 48.7, which is under 50. Under 50 suggests contraction. That is, manufacturing is actually contracting. And indeed, it turns out that the U.S. manufacturing sector has been in recession, i.e. contracting, for 34 of the last 36 months. So it didn't start with Trump. It started with Biden. But manufacturing shrinking in the United States. We're not reindustrializing. We're continuing or accelerating deindustrialization. Again, economists said that tariffs would not result in reindustrialization. The tariffs don't lead to more industry. I don't know, those economists, pesky scientists. It's awful. It really is terrible. It doesn't stop MAGA, it doesn't stop Trump, it doesn't stop any of these people from continuing. But really, Trump knows this, and his administration knows this. Because for any sector where there's some trouble, or any sector that might actually lead to economic growth in the United States, what does Trump do? Cuts tariffs. I mean, think about the fact that when it comes to AI, computers, electronics, phones, anything to do with tech, that's all exempt from tariffs. It's all exempt. Why is it exempt? Because tariffs are harmful, and we don't want this industry to be harmed. So we exempt it. I mean, we've exempted energy from Canada because we need energy, and we need to drive prices down, not up, so we're not tariffing it. I mean, God, eggs from Turkey are exempt for tariffs. Why? Because we want to lower cost for consumers, and we know tariff increase costs. So we're going to lower costs by exempting them. How about beef from Argentina? Same thing. How about, as of Friday, fertilizer from pretty much anywhere? Yeah, we need to help those farmers, so we're not going to tariff the goods that they use. And of course, coffee and bananas and stuff that you would put in your grocery bag. And you're complaining about cost of living going up, so they cut tariffs, which suggests that that tariffs raised prices in spite of the Fed study. Here's a good quote. Thanks to President Trump for removing the tariffs President Trump placed on these agricultural products, this is what winning looks like. Placing tariffs, seeing costs rise, people upset, and then lowering them to appease the people who got upset. I mean, I think, his popularity numbers are dropping like a rock, and I think, or dropping. I mean, they were already low, but dropping. And so I think people are starting to figure it out. Maybe. I mean, I think this will require the second coming. Maybe some of the people who criticize me for criticizing Trump on tariffs will show up on my chat one of these days and apologize. Maybe. But probably not. Probably not. And then on top of this, the reality is the tariffs are just, this is from an article, I think by, let me just see, I think it's by Scott Lincecum. No, it's by an article in Politico. And it says, business from Wall Street to Main Street are struggling to comply with President Trump's Byzantine tariff regime, driving up costs and counteracting for some the benefits of the corporate tax cut Republicans passed earlier this year. I'm reading from the article. To give an example, an industrial product that faces a monthly uniform 5% tariff rate in the past would now be taxed at 15% if it comes from the EU or Japan, 20% from Norway and many African countries, 24 to 25% from countries in Southeast Asia, and upwards of 50% from India, Brazil, or China. This has been an exhausting year, I'd say, for most CEOs in the country. This is quoting a CEO. The level of executive time that's being put into accounting for all this, and dealing with it from a management perspective has been enormous. So instead of focusing on innovation, or for example, growth, they're focusing on how they deal with tariffs. Upping the pressure, the Justice Department has announced that it intends to make the prosecution of customs fraud one of its top priorities. So now they're going to go sue these companies, go after these companies for customs fraud. The proliferation of trade regulation and threat of intensified enforcement has driven many companies to beef up their staff and spend what could add up to tens of millions of dollars to ensure that they are not running afoul of Trump's requirements. The time and expense involved, combined with the tens of billions of dollars in higher tariffs that companies are paying each month to import goods, amount to a massive burden that is weighing down industries traditionally reliant on imported products. And it's denting, for some, the impact of the hundreds of billions of dollars of tax cuts that companies will receive over the next decade via the One Big Beautiful Bill Act championed by the White House. Can I say it? I think I should say it. I told you so. I mean, tariffs are massive economic distortion. They misallocate labor, they misallocate time, they misallocate thought, they distort prices, and they're a hidden, or not so hidden, tax on all Americans. It's not good. It's really, really, really bad. And, at some point, people are going to have to figure this out. And maybe there'll be growing pressure on this administration to, if Trump really wants to help American consumers and lower the cost of living for Americans and reduce costs, it's actually, he could actually have a big impact. Just eliminate all tariffs on all goods forever. zero them out. Zero. And I mean, the economic boost that would provide, the economic boost that would provide to Americans would be stunning and unprecedented. All right. But you know that will never happen. You know that will never happen. All right, Charlesbad just gifted 10 memberships, and I just gifted 5. I'm going to gift another 5. What the hell? Today, we're generous today, right? So we're going to gift another 5. All right. So we've added 20 members to our roster. That, God, I mean, that makes me feel guilty because I haven't done a members-only show in a while, but I'll do one. I'll do one soon, and we'll have 20 new members who will be able to watch it. In the meantime, you guys who are gifted membership should go and check out all the old members-only shows, and you can catch up on all of those and enjoy those before I do a next one. All right. So that's Tariff Insanity. It's once a week we're going to have to cover that, or at least when you know these idiots do new stupid things, we'll have to cover it. The other issue I want to talk about that's somewhat related to tariffs and generally related to the economy is I just want to put out a warning out there. A warning out there that there's some real financial risks and that we should all just be paying attention to. Now, I don't like calling recessions, and every time I do, I it's not successful because, there hasn't been a recession in a very long time. A very long time. I mean, we had a recession kind of in COVID, but that was artificially created. We haven't had really a recession, since the great financial crisis. That's ridiculous. Given the amount of manipulation of our economy, the inflation, the manipulation of interest rates, the government spending, the bailouts. And we haven't really had a financial crisis. We really haven't had a financial crisis since 2008. And we're due. It's 16 years. I don't think there's cycles, but, every couple of decades, suddenly every 15 years or so, there seems to be something happens. I don't think we've solved that. I don't think we found the formula never to have another financial crisis or never to have another recession. That is not in the cards. Although we have replaced volatility with just slower economic growth. The economy is barely growing or growing very slowly. But still. And there's just a lot of stuff going on out there that I think we all need to be just aware of as we think about the future. And I'm not going to tell you what to do about it, and I'm not sure what to do about it. I'm not sure what I am going to do about it, other than be aware. And consider how you want to protect yourself. Here's the reality. The economy right now is basically growing because of massive infrastructure spending into AI. Does all the spending make sense? The spending is almost all funded through debt. Is that debt going to be paid back? How much of it? When? Some failures. How big are they going to be? Is AI really as good as they think it is, and is scaling the number of servers what is actually going to make it, earth-shattering, completely changing the world in which we live? I mean, it's already doing a lot, but is it just scaling up the servers going to make it better? So much better as to justify trillions and trillions of dollars, and this is trillions of dollars of new money flowing into it? I mean, I saw a story today about Peter Thiel selling his NVIDIA investment and getting out of NVIDIA, as are some other big investment names. I don't know. I don't know if it's the time to get out. But are the valuations of these companies, do they make sense? Is at some point, could the mood in Wall Street change around AI and its prospect for the future, given that it's not clear where the cash comes from? It's not clear how you make money. It's not clear how you pay back all this debt. So there is the whole AI bubble that people are talking about, and I do think it's a bubble. Now, you could take the Jeff Bezos approach, which I think is true, that it's kind of a bubble that builds infrastructure, and when it bursts, a lot of people will lose money, but the infrastructure will be there and will be used and it will be valuable. Okay, but people will lose money, and it's not clear who the people who lose the money are, who gets hurt. I mean, it's primarily private equity and big banks and that are jumping into funding all this. Everybody's afraid to be left behind. And then, of course, it's the stock market, which is at all-time highs, historical valuations. I mean, historical, maybe hysterical, I don't know, but certainly historical valuations. Are they justified? Could we see the market, stock market, go down 10, 20, 30%? It wouldn't be unusual. Stock markets often go down. Well, not often, but over, once every couple of decades, certainly, 30, 35%. Is that possible? If that happens, what happens? There's a lot of debt out in the economy. Private equity firms, it's not in the banks. It's actually private equity. Massive amounts of debt. And to add a wrinkle to that, there's a lot of risk in places where there never used to be, like insurance. Insurance used to be, in order to pay off the insurance, you used to basically buy bonds and maybe buy some stocks, but buy bonds primarily. Bonds are safe. You get paid. It's predictable. But there's some argument that, in order to generate more returns, as private equity have been buying insurance companies and offshoring, a lot of the reinsurance has always been offshore where there's less regulation. But the argument is that maybe there's a lot of risk being taken on, a lot of unusual types of debt, a lot of unusual type of securities being taken on that maybe weren't in the past because insurance was conservative and simple and predictable. And now it's not. Could we see a crisis coming from there? It is hard to tell, although a lot of financial publications are warning against the insurance sector, warning about the insurance sector, and maybe taking on a lot of risk in the insurance sector. Again, remember, these are all regulated products, these are all regulated industries, and the regulations create distortions and perversions, and who knows? It really is hard to tell. It's not that insurance is bad or evil or anything. It's just that it's opaque. A lot of people have annuities. I always recommend against getting annuities, but people get annuities. I mean, they rely on the insurance companies remaining solvent and that the reinsurance companies can back up the insurance company. And given the kind of regulations and given the incentives, it's hard to be sanguine in this financial world, in the financial industry that we have, to fail. All kinds of bad incentives are out there. So I don't know. I mean, there really seems to be a lot of press right now. Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, others, Bloomberg, emphasizing the risks that seem to be being accumulated in all these different places in insurance. Do you remember we talked about strategy the Bitcoin company of Salos Bitcoin company, the company that basically buys Bitcoin and then trades at many multiple of the Bitcoin price. Well, strategy is down like 50% over the last few months. People have finally figured out that it was ridiculous. It didn't make any sense. And indeed, Bitcoin itself, about just over a month after it reached an all-time high, Bitcoin has basically erased all its gains for the year and is flat for the year. And the thing about Bitcoin, right? The thing about Bitcoin is that as it declines, a lot of people who use debt in order to finance Bitcoin are going to have to sell Bitcoin to repay the debt, which will place more downward pressure on it. Now, I don't know. I'm not predicting Bitcoin crisis. Generally today, I'm not predicting anything. I'm just warning. There are a lot of these warning signs out there. There's a lot of risk in the system. And our economy is not heading towards some golden age, renaissance, a booming boom. We're not heading towards 3, 4, 5% GDP growth. If we get 2, we're lucky. So, I don't know. I am worried about where we are. I'm worried about finances. Financial sector. I'm worried about the economy. Stable coins are going to, increasing significantly, and they become a big chunk of the economy. I don't know that people have really thought through stable coins. I hope they have. I mean, they can make a lot of sense, but they have implications. It's a way to monetize our debt. It's a way to turn debt, government debt, into money directly. It's money that we will be using, those coins. You'll be using those coins. Yeah, we're in some interesting times and some potentially troublesome times. I don't want to be a fearmonger. I don't like fearmongering. And I'm not predicting I'm not predicting recession, although I'm predicting slow economic growth, if any. And I'm just warning that there are a lot of flashing red lights out there. Lots of flashing red lights out there. Okay, just a few smaller items we've got left. We've got a bunch of them, but we've got some of them. All right, let's start with not that. All right, we want to start with Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein. The Jeffrey Epstein scandal that keeps on giving, that just doesn't go away, disappeared. Well, anyway, Congress is about to vote on basically demanding that the Justice Department release all the Epstein files. Over the weekend, it looked, the Republicans clearly had a majority, Democrats clearly had a majority to vote on this, and it looked like significant number of Republicans were going to bolt and go against Trump, who's been trying not to release the files, demanding for the files not to be released. It seemed like about 100 Republicans were going to vote to have them released in spite of Donald Trump. This is the one thing, the one issue that they're willing to go against Trump. It's Epstein. Epstein is the one thing they're willing to go against Trump. Anyway, the vote is tomorrow, and it looked like they were gonna bolt on him. So Trump did what he often does. After, weeks of trying to block the House vote, going after different Congress members, trying to argue with them, trying to force them, twisting arms and everything. It's clear now that he's going to lose the vote. So he is pretending. He's been for it all along, which is classic Trump, right? He writes, as I said on Friday night about Air Force One to the fake news media, which he talks to all the time, I guess, House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files because we have nothing to hide. And it's time to move on from this Democratic hoax perpetrated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect the great success of the Republican Party, including our recent victory on Democratic shutdown. The Department of Justice has already turned over tens of thousands of pages to the public on Epstein. Remember, he opposed all of this. Are looking at various Democratic operatives, Bill Clinton, Reid Hoffman, Larry Summers, and their relationship to Epstein. And the House Oversight Committee can have whatever they are legally entitled to. We'll get to that in a minute. I don't care, he says. All I do care about is that Republicans get back on point, which is the economy, affordability, which he is destroying, where we are winning big. Oh, no, you're losing, actually. Our victory in reducing inflation from the highest level in history. In history. Take a moment to laugh out loud on this one. If reducing it for the highest level in history, maybe in the universe. And all the rest. So he goes on, all the achievement, all of his achievements. He says, nobody cared about Jeffrey Epstein when he was alive. And if the Democrats had anything, they would have released it before the landslide election victory. Landslide. Some members of the Republican Party are being used. And we can't let that happen. Let's start talking about the Republican Party's success. All right. That's what he came out of. And now he's backing the vote. They will vote to release the files. But this is the thing. They can't release them. And this is Trump's, clever trickery, right? So Trump realizes he's going to lose the House vote. So he comes and says, yeah, vote yes on this. Release the files. But then he tells the Justice Department to start investigating Democrats based on those files. So when Congress goes to the Justice Department and asks for the files, the Justice Department is going to say, we can't release them. We're in the middle of an investigation. And Trump can say, well, I wanted to release. It's not my fault. There's nothing there about me. So I don't care. So, yes, Trump has been avoiding the release of these forever. Who knows why? You can use your imagination to figure out why. But now he wants them released because he thinks that by telling the Justice Department to investigate, they won't be able to release the stuff. Who knows? We will see what happens. In the meantime, he's had this massive falling out with Marjorie Taylor Greene, the linchpin of his coalition, the sane, reasonable, rational Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jewish space laser Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is now coming out and apologizing all over the place for her toxic politics. She's criticizing Trump primarily on the Epstein files. This is what she cares about. She said in an interview on CNN, humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. I'm committed, and I've been working on this a lot lately, to put down the knives in politics. I really just want to see people be kind to one another. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is the most toxic congresswoman out there on the right. There's a bunch of them on the left. And of course, she's being criticized by Matt Walsh because Republicans are not toxic. It's Democrats that are toxic. Because Democrats killed Charlie Kirk, or leftists, right? Leftists, not one, many killed Charlie Kirk. The whole leftists killed him. Have we seen any proof that there was more than one guy? Anything? So Marjorie Taylor Greene is now presenting herself as moderate, as nice, as friendly, as wanting to bring the country together, as uniting us all. This complete nutcase. Complete nutcase. So, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. And now that she had a fight with Trump, and that they are, they're not on the same side. Does she even get reelected? Is there a primary challenge to her? Does somebody else take her job? She's ready. There were some rumors that she would run for Senate. She's not running for Senate, but she couldn't win now that she's got Trump against her. All right, let's do some foreign policy stuff. We've got Trump's peace deal in Gaza. We're waiting for Hamas to be disarmed and to be displaced from leadership in the Gaza Strip. But the reality is that that's not happening. Hamas is stockpiling advanced weapon systems in other countries, waiting for the opportunity to smuggle it into Gaza, waiting for the Israelis to lower their focus for a little bit, and they will smuggle it into Gaza. Hamas is actually more popular, popularity is rising in Gaza. They're basically establishing law and order. None of these gangs roaming around. Now, Hamas is in gang warfare, this is what happens with anarchy. One gang dominates, and people are relieved because gang warfare is worse than having one authoritarian gang. Every time we see a place like Gaza, you get more proof that anarchy doesn't work. And nobody wants to send troops into there except one country. The only country that's willing to send troops into Gaza is Turkey. And Israel's like, no Turkish troops in Gaza. We don't trust them. They're our enemy. We're not putting Turks into Gaza. Nobody else wants to send troops in there because they know it's brutal. Hamas doesn't want to disarm. Hamas has no incentive to disarm. It's not going to. Just to give you a sense of Palestinian public opinion, in the West Bank, 51% of Gazans surveyed expressed positive views of Hamas performance during the war, October 7th, and their complete failure militarily during the war, 51%. And that was 43% in May and 39% a year ago. So they've only gotten better. So, this Trump peace deal has improved Hamas's political standing. 41% of Gazans said they're aligned with Hamas, which is up 4 points from 5 months ago and the highest since December of 2023. So Hamas is Gaza's being destroyed, but people perceive somehow Hamas as victorious because they're still around. 2 years, 2+ years after the conflict started. Hamas is still there. They still have weapons. They're still out in the streets. They're still governing at least a portion of Gaza. They have basically survived an onslaught by maybe the second best military force in the world today, the Israelis, and they survived. Trump has this idea of his 20-point peace plan that they're going to be disarmed, but everybody knows that they're not going to disarm, that nobody can force them to disarm except for one force, that is Israel. And Israel has been barred by Donald Trump from doing that. So Trump has prevented the one force in the world that could disarm Hamas from disarming Hamas. We've got Hamas continuing to steal the aid and redistribute it itself and make money thus. We've got Hamas leadership in Qatar and so on, still with lots of money, I'm sure supported by the Qataris, buying weapons, storing them in Yemen and other African countries, just waiting for the opportunity to smuggle them in to Gaza. Hamas has not been pacified. They have no intention to give up control. They don't intend to go away and disappear. And maybe they'll change their name, but they're not going anywhere. Israel didn't win this war. Now, I've said a lot about the outcome, but Israel didn't win it. And the Gazans know it. The Palestinians know it. Israel will find out in the future when all this comes back and bites them. And Trump, who knows? Trump's one big foreign policy success was this so-called peace deal. What's he going to do? Well, the pressure is now for Trump is to skip disarming Hamas and begin reconstruction. The administration supposedly is pushing interim solutions, and Israel is pushing back. The U.S. wants to start creating something. The what do you call it? The Riviera, the Gazan Riviera. Wants to create a Gazan Riviera while Hamas is still there with arms. I mean, it's just ludicrous. It's just pathetic. It's sad. All those people dying. I'm talking about the Israelis for nothing, and then people bemoan the 60 or 70,000 Palestinians who had died. Most of whom, or at least a large percentage of whom, are Hamas members and supporters. A small percentage of whom are completely innocent, and one of the smallest numbers of dead in urban warfare in all of history. Just pathetic and ridiculous and so, yeah, you might have been happy when this peace deal was done and the hostages came back, but it ain't over. It is not over. Anyway, in the meantime, the crazy messianic religious Jews in the West Bank who think that they're above the law, who think that they are some kind of superior being, and who, if they represented all Jews, then there's a reason to hate them, but they don't. They're a small minority. But these messianic Jews on the West Bank are continuing to harass, but use violence against Palestinians, and not just Palestinians, use violence against IDF, Israeli Defense Forces soldiers. They're rioting in Palestinian villages, they're setting fire to homes, they're burning cars, they're beating people up. And again, this includes not just Palestinians, but includes soldiers, police, border police of the Israeli state. These are irrational, religious fanatics that need to be shut down. Years ago, they should have been shut down. The problem is, some of their members sit in the Israeli government. Now, Netanyahu finally said something about all of this. He basically said that they're going to go after them, and they're going to shut them down, and they're going to use the full force of the law against them. But I think most people in Israel think that he said this before, and they're waiting to see results. There was a bulldozing of an illegal settlement that the army engaged in, I think over the weekend. But there's a lot to do. There are people who need to be in jail for being violent, for violating people's rights. Palestinians have rights. You can't just go and beat them up. You can't kill them for no reason. You can't burn their homes. You can't burn their cars. People need to be prosecuted and put in jail. Otherwise, Israel loses one of the things that makes it a civilized place, which is the rule of law. So Israel needs to shape up on this. It really is horrific that they're letting a small minority of fanatics engage in violence and without consequences. There need to be consequences. All right, let's go through a few other countries. Chile. Chile had an election over the weekend. It had an election, kind of a first round presidential election. You need 50% in the first round to win the presidency. Nobody got that. The largest share of the vote actually went to a communist. I know it's hard to believe, but yeah, to a communist. Jara, who, I guess, I think it's a she, Jeanette Jara, who literally was the candidate of the Chilean Communist Party. And just to give you a sense, 26% of Chileans voted for a candidate from the Communist Party. She got the most votes. However, almost all of the rest of the votes, 70% of the votes, went to members of the right, some kind of right. The winner among those candidates is somebody called Jose Antonio Cast, a populist, ultra-conservative lawyer who ran as the anti-immigration, anti-crime, law and order. He's also anti-abortion. He's also anti-gay marriage, which he didn't emphasize during the campaign because he probably wouldn't have won if he had. But he got 24% of the vote. And unfortunately, all the other candidates split the rest. So between the two leaders got 50%, and yet everybody else got the rest of the 50%. That included, for example, a real free marketer. A real free marketer by the name of, I had this name here and it's disappeared. Anyway, a real free marketer, at the level of Millet type free marketer. Yeah, Johannes Kaiser, who I think is Axel Kaiser's brother. Axel Kaiser runs a free market think tank in Chile. I think this is his brother. Johannes Kaiser, who got 14% of the vote. And another conservative who got 13% of the vote. You'd think they'd have one candidate instead of splitting it up like this. They could have won in the first round. So going into the the second round, the Cast, the ultra-conservative lawyer, is clearly the favorite to win by a big margin. He'll trounce the communist. And this will be another country that is shifted to the right. Sadly, not the Javier Milei right, but a conservative right, a ultra-conservative right, a religious right, a statist right. He says he'll deregulate and he'll do all these things, but that's not his primary primary focus. Not his primary focus at all. His primary focus is the social issues. Now it is, Chile is seeing still one of the safest places in Latin America. It's seeing an uptick on crime. It's seen an uptick in illegal immigration, particularly from Venezuela. And those are the issues. This is a guy who admires Nayib Bukele, the authoritarian president of El Salvador. This is a guy who admires Trump. But overall, this is a repudiation of the left. It is another country that has moved to the right. We saw Bolivia move to the right, defeat a socialist for the first time in over 20 years. We are probably going to see Peru have an election in which it defeats a right, where the right defeats the left. You're going to see Colombia and Peru shift to the right. I mean, and then hopefully, in Brazil, we'll see that later. So overall, the tendency in Latin America is a move to the right. Sadly, not the free market right, but a kind of a populist type right. One country that still has a very left-wing president is Mexico. Mexico saw major riots in the streets of Mexico City on Saturday. Several thousand people went to the streets and they attacked the presidential palace, which was heavily guarded by riot police. And for several hours, they confronted those police. Reports say about 120 people were injured, 100 of them police officers, and a few dozen people were arrested. These are called Gen Z protests, and they're spreading around the world. They took place in Nepal. We talked about that, and now they've reached Mexico. These are young people. They're fed up. They're pissed off. And the main reason for being fed up is the dominance of the cartels in Mexico, the power of the cartels in Mexico, the fact that the cartels control big chunks of Mexico. The Mexican central government has basically ceded power to the cartels. They kill mayors. They basically kill journalists and politicians with no consequences. Nothing happens. And young people in Mexico are fed up. And this was the source of the Gen Z protests. They believe that the president, Sheinbaum, is basically a puppet of the cartels. Now, she has high approval ratings. I mean, she won by a big margin, and she dominates the legislature. So these young people are not representative of the wider Mexican society, but they argue that she is just a puppet of the cartels. We'll see how this develops and whether she maintains her popularity as young people rebel against her. Finally, the UK Labour Party has appointed a few weeks ago a new Home Secretary. That's like Interior Secretary, or I don't know what the equivalent would be. Her name is Shabana Mahmood. So, by definition, almost given that name, most likely she is Muslim. Anyway, they've appointed her, and she just came out with a plan this week, or I guess today, or yesterday, for major immigration reform in the UK, basically making it much, much more difficult for asylum seekers to enter the country, to stay in the country, or to get any kind of citizenship in the country. So a real hardline set of rules for handling asylum seekers and illegal immigrants. We're talking about taking illegal immigrants and deporting them, and telling countries that if they don't accept the illegal immigrants that they're sending back, then the UK will basically not grant their citizens any visas anymore. The Labour Party in the UK is taking this seriously because it's the most important issue right now in the UK. More important, I think, even than the economy, which is awful. And it is seeing Farage and his political party become the dominant party in England. That is, polls are showing that Farage would win in a landslide right now. The Conservative Party has also made itself far more aggressive about immigration. And now even the Labour Party, even the left, is coming down hard on both asylum seekers and illegal immigrants. The Labour Party changes that it's going to make, tough on asylum policy, is basically trying to mimic the Danish system, which has basically reduced immigration to Denmark dramatically. That system was also devised by a center-left government. It grants asylum seekers resident permit for only 1 or 2 years, no guarantee of permanent residency. To gain permanent status, new arrivals must learn Danish and find work. Since the rules were tightened in Denmark, the number of people granted asylum in Denmark has plummeted. Migrants that came in for Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan all went through Denmark straight to Sweden, where they used to get welfare checks and free housing. Denmark doesn't provide that, and the UK is trying to mimic that. So Denmark has some of the toughest immigration policies in Western Europe, and the United Kingdom is trying to mimic it and trying to deport as many people as they can who entered the country illegally, and trying to reduce dramatically the number of people who are coming in and requesting asylum. So all three parties, Nigel Farage, the Conservatives, and Labour, are kind of jockeying to be tough on immigrants, to be tough on immigration. And what's interesting about this is, of course, but this is Britain. That this is coming from a Home Secretary who herself is probably the daughter of immigrants, right? And has a Muslim name, if nothing else. And this is coming from a left-wing party that up until very recently was like, let them in, anybody can come in, no standards, we'll give them all welfare. And even this political party has now shifted away from that. So we will see how this develops. And but clearly, Europe has become unequivocally anti-immigrant, and this is spreading throughout Europe. All right, I have a hard stop at 5, so I will try to get through all the Super Chat questions, but if not, if there are any left over, then I will cover them on tomorrow's show. But let's try to get them all today. I'll just remind you some of our sponsors. We're Michael Williams. If you want to find out about Defenders of Capitalism, which I've been involved and I teach for, and the leadership program of the Rockies, check out defendersofcapitalism.com. Defendersofcapitalism.com. Check out that website. ARI has a European conference on in April 17th and 19th. If you're under 34, you qualify for a scholarship. So apply for a scholarship. Check out aynrand.org/start here. If you're over 34, you can get a discount, which is 26YBS10 is the discount code. Alex Epstein is, the most prominent advocate for freedom in energy, and you should follow him. You'll learn a lot. You'll become a better communicator, and you can do that on alexepstein.substack.com. alexepstein.substack.com. All right. Let's jump into the questions. We've got 3 $50 questions from David. We'll start with them, and then we'll go to the $20 questions, and then we'll do the rest. And we are about $176 short of a goal for the second hour, where we should be, kind of the kind of cost we need to cover for a 2-hour show. So please, I know we've done really, really well the last few shows. Let's continue on that track by getting to the 500. The best way to support the show right now, given the questions, is with a sticker. Mary Aline, thank you for the sticker. Nature Observer, thank you for the sticker. And given how many people we have, and Ryan, thank you for the sticker, you can all just do like a $1.99 or $2.99 or something like that. And there are enough of you that we would get to our number. We will get to the amount of money anyway. So please consider that value. A trade, value for value. You get a value by listening. Yeah, Lincoln just did a sticker. Thank you, Lincoln. That was your 20th super chat, super sticker, whatever, ever. So YouTube, let me know about some of these numbers. All right. David says, can you debunk Kant's categorical imperatives? It seems like a good idea. Am I wrong? I don't see what's so good about it. Joseph, thank you for the sticker. You guys are doing $2.99, $4.99. That's great. I don't know what's so good about it, and that was Joseph's third super sticker. I don't know what's good about it at all. Basically, a categorical imperative is an arbitrary statement. It basically says that there are things that we know are right. How do we know them? We just do. You can't reason them. You can't get them from reality because we have no access to reality. They're not things that support human life necessarily, because that's not the standard of morality. They're just there. You just know them. Now, there's nothing to rebuke there because there's nothing to debunk there because there's no argument being made. There's a sense in which this is completely arbitrary. He pulls it out of nowhere. Now, I'm sure that in Kantian form, there's a long, convoluted attempt at an explanation that doesn't make any sense. And I am not a Kantian expert, so I'm not going to untangle all of it. But at the end of the day, I can't. So it's a good question to ask one of our philosophers who maybe can give you a more thorough. But the essence of it is that the whole point of categorical imperatives are these are moral duties that you have in your mind, that you know them, almost like intuitions that are just there, and you should just follow them. Not because they lead to any kind of outcome, but because it is your duty to follow them. Not because they're good for you, but because they're a duty to follow them. The whole point of categorical imperatives is to inculcate a duty-based morality. You do it because that is what the categorical imperative says. That's what's required. That's what you must do, no matter the outcome, no matter the motivation. I mean, indeed, Kant says, if your motivation is self-interest, if somehow doing this benefits you in some way, then you're not doing it out of a sense of duty, then it's not moral what you're doing. Morality implies that it's not in your self-interest. Morality demands that you do it not because you understand, not because you agree, not because it's good for you, not because there's some goal you want to achieve, but because that is it. Now, think about it. Think about it. These duties, since they don't exist, there are no categorical imperatives. They're not there, really. Somebody has to fill in that gap. You have to figure out what to do, what duties to fulfill. And this is part of the link that you can see from that to, on the one hand, a society ready to do its duty at the command of the Führer. Two, well, we all have different categorical imperatives. The mind is malleable. The mind is personal. So we all have different stuff. So it's completely subjective because there's no standard. So you get everything out of this kind of morality, all the way from a duty-bound, authoritarian morality to a completely subjectivist, anything-goes morality. David, the best analysis of this, the best explanation of this, can be found in the Ominous Parallels, Leonard Peikoff's magnificent, brilliant book about the rise of Nazi Germany and its parallels in America. So the Ominous Parallels is a must-read, and there he goes into great detail, which into Kant's categorical imperatives and how they lead to the Nazis. Thank you, David. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Martin. And Martin just did his first super chat. Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate that. It's a €1.99. That is great. If everybody did just that, we would blow through our target easily. So please consider joining Martin and Paul and the other stickers where you don't even have to ask a question. David asks, has anyone thought to ask Nick Fuentes to explain his mongrel mixed breed nature? Nick's concern, not mine. And also that he seems to be gay. Again, Nick's concern, not mine. I don't think so. And I don't know why anybody would, because the reality is, who cares where he comes from, what his genes are, what his orientation is, or what his sexual orientation is. And again, I don't know what he is. I don't know if he's gay or not gay. I don't care. I don't know if he's mixed breed or not mixed breed. I don't care. Whatever he is, he's a anti-Semitic, racist, misogynist, irrational, freak, and should be shunned. So nobody should actually ask him anything. He's just a manipulative, evil little bastard who says true things sometimes and leverages that into the horrors of what he believes. And, so David says, but it makes Nick a bit of a hypocrite. Yeah, but everybody's a hypocrite. Or I shouldn't say everybody. Almost everybody's a hypocrite. I mean, how many people live up to their moral code? How many people live up to their ideas? ideals. How many people actually do that? Very few. Very few. I don't think hypocrisy is that big of a deal. Everybody's a hypocrite. Much more important is the sheer evil of the ideas themselves, no matter whether there's hypocrisy or not. And, you know, he will say he's not really racist. He only hates blacks. It's not generally racism. And he wants the United States to be a white nationalist state. But Hispanics are white. They have roots in Spain. Spain is European and thus white. So, I mean, the whole thing is he will rationalize his hypocrisy. So Chandler says, I always heard that hypocrisy is the worst part. No, it's not. The worst part is the ideas. But every altruist in the world, which basically means everybody pretty much, is a hypocrite. Because how many of them really sacrifice for their fellow man? How many of them really don't think about their own self-interest? Every Kantian is a hypocrite. How many of them actually follow their, their duty? How many actually follow their categorical imperatives? They don't. They're all hypocrites. Hypocrisy is the most common thing in the world when you have a world dominated by bad philosophy. Bad philosophy, part of its characteristics are you can't live it. I mean, some people can at the expense of others, but a majority of people cannot actually live down to it. Live down to it. So they don't, which is good, right? But that makes them hypocrites, which is not their biggest sin. The biggest sin is holding those evil ideas to begin with. Okay, David asks, why is Bitcoin different from gold? What makes gold so desirable? Isn't Bitcoin valuable? Just a matter of what a large portion of the population accepts as a store of value? Well, sure. But this is the difference. You have to be convinced that in the future, in some future, any future, other people will be willing to buy it from you, will continue to view it as a store of value. And with Bitcoin, there's just no reason to assume that that is the case. It's some, electronic bits that have certain characteristics that are not that unique. You could replicate it in other forms. And it's not clear what its use is, particularly if the world goes to hell. But what is gold? Gold's a metal. It's a metal that can be used for all kinds of things. It's a metal that people have used throughout history for all kinds of things. It's shiny. It glitters or sparkles, I don't know, one or the other. So people have been using gold as jewelry for everything. Gold gets its value from jewelry. And the reality is, and this is true of money, money has to be something that lots of people want for its own sake. And therefore, it becomes a common medium of exchange, because when you accept it in payment for a real thing that you're giving somebody else, you have utter confidence that then you can turn around and use it to pay somebody else, that somebody else will take it off of your hands. Because money at the end of the day is not valuable other than in the things that it can buy. It's the things that are valuable, not the money in and of itself. So you want to make sure that the money can be used to buy stuff. We know throughout history, gold has been something that people like to possess. Silver too. The problem with silver is, and silver could be used for smaller denominations. And silver's always been used together with gold, together with sometimes even copper, as smaller denomination money. So anything that it has a use can be used as money, but it also has to be divisible, and it has to be easy to carry, and all these things. And, gold in and of itself is not particularly useful. What you really want is gold to be stored somewhere, and gold just to be representative. And what you want is paper money, which is what we evolved to, that is backed by gold, or electronic money, which is backed by gold. You don't want to be lugging around gold. The only reason today to buy gold is if you believe that there's a probability kind of the world ends, society collapses, it all crashes, and then you can still buy guns, ammunition, and food with the gold that you have. And that's why you should have small denomination gold coins, not gold bars, because gold bars are hard to move around, and nobody's going to give you change for the gold bars. But there's just, Bitcoin is just what people decide, but it has no use, particularly if there's no electricity, but it has no use. People don't buy and sell stuff with it. And you don't know what value it's going to have tomorrow. Now, gold fluctuates somewhat, but within certain bounds, it doesn't fluctuate anything like the way Bitcoin fluctuates. So no, Bitcoin and gold, not the same thing. We can talk more about Bitcoin sometime. Jamie, we should be able to think, say what we want, but when immigrants come to a country and publicly admit they intend to bring about Sharia, should they be deported at a point? Must we choose survival of the country over free speech? Well, I don't think it's a conflict. I think, as I've said many times, as a country, we need to decide that we have certain enemies, that Islamism, those who would bring Sharia to our shores, are the enemy, and they shouldn't be allowed in. And this is an enemy ideology that we will not let spread in our country because it is an enemy. People spouting this ideology are killing us. So I think, as such, it's not a violation of free speech if Islamists, those who advocate for global Sharia law, are viewed and identified and categorized as an enemy. Then them actively promoting Sharia is an act of war, an act of treason, and they can be arrested. Just like you don't have Nazis running around America spouting Nazism during World War II. They'd be arrested. So the West has to be willing to identify its enemies, declare them as such, make it clear that it will not tolerate Islamism within its borders. Yeah, and then some of these people spouting Sharia law need to be sent back home, put in prison, depending on their immigration status. Because you could have Muslims that converted to Islam who have deep blood roots in a country for many generations, and the fact that they convert to Islam and then preach Sharia and advocate for Islamic takeover country, just the same. So it's not just immigrants; it's anybody who preaches and argues for an enemy ideology. But for that, you have to define the enemy. Jamie, Monaco has a life expectancy 86.5. U.S. is under 80. There are 30 countries higher than the United States, or most, with universal health care. I believe private would be better, but a little confused. Why such a gap? Thanks. Well, Monaco is a bunch of very, very wealthy people. Only wealthy people live in Monaco. The people who work for the wealthy people in Monaco live in France, and they come into Monaco every day to clean and to run the restaurants and all of that. So Monaco is a place of very wealthy individuals who can afford the best healthcare in the world and who take care of, we have leisure time to take care of themselves. You can't judge anything by Monaco standards, right? But yeah, the United States has very low life expectancy. And the question is why? And if you visit the United States and you spend a little bit of time here, you realize why. Because, Americans are fat. Obesity is probably the number one cause of reduced life expectancy in the United States. It has nothing to do with socialized medicine. When you control for life habits, for culture, for obesity, for the junk food, for the things that, for the lack of exercise, for all the bad behaviors Americans engage in, then life expectancy in the United States is not that different than other countries. It's the fact that we don't take care of ourselves. It has nothing to do with our healthcare system. It has everything to do with personal responsibility. Americans are just not, you go to Europe, I was in Spain, Portugal, Italy, people are much, much thinner. Much, much thinner. So now maybe GLP-1 drugs will change that, and life expectancy in the United States will rise and be the same. So that's one. Lifestyle factors. Drug use in America is much, much higher. That's not a problem of socialized medicine. The fact that Americans die of overdose of drugs, Americans die more of car accidents, Americans die more from crime. There's more crime, particularly fatal crime in the United States than other countries. All of those things drive down life expectancy in the United States. If you look at the life expectancy of Americans who reach the age of 70 and the life expectancy of Europeans who reach the age of 70, Americans do better than Europeans. That's a measure of healthcare. Because if you die over the age of 70, it's probably an issue of the healthcare quality you're getting. And maybe how well you took care of yourself up until that point. But if you didn't, you probably died before 70. So if you take out the lifestyle issues, then there's not a big gap between Europeans and Americans. And then add to that the fact that Americans don't have a private healthcare system. They have a highly socialized, highly distorted, highly perverted, worst of all worlds type of healthcare system. David, Trump's blaming everything on radical leftists reminds me of the Ministry of Magic blaming everything on mass murderer Sirius Black. Oh, this is in Harry Potter. I don't quite remember that, but yeah, it makes sense, right? Sirius Black. Those are good books. I enjoyed those. All right, Andrew says, some in your audience attribute evil to craziness, and you usually insist that no, it's evil. I do think evil can lead to mental decay, Tucker's demons, but is your point that the choice to be wantonly irrational is primary? Yes. The primary is to choose not to think. If you choose not to think, you're irrational. By default, because the tool of rationality is not being engaged. So it is the choice to think that is the root of evil, not mental health. You know, mental health can affect everything, but that is not the core, that's not the essence, certainly not of, most people. I'm not saying that some people are not born, have such a really crazy, a real chemical imbalance or something. And therefore do crazy things. But the majority, it's about thinking or lack of thinking. Okay, Michael, part one, how was the Warsaw Ghetto uprising so effective against the power of the German Wehrmacht? Even if you're at a munition disadvantage, if you're armed with the moral high ground and right philosophy, you can successfully challenge more powerful tyrannical governments. The Second Amendment is a crucial application of individual rights. The Ghetto of Warsaw was, in the end, not successful. The Warsaw Ghetto was destroyed. Its inhabitants, most of them, sent to concentration camps. A few escaped into the woods and survived or died later. But you can't call Warsaw Ghetto a successful overpowering of a tyrannical government. The success was that it lasted a long time, and it took the Germans a long time to put it down. It took the Germans a long time to kill everybody there. And most of the reasons for that have to do with the fact that the Germans were busy. They had an Eastern Front, they had a Western Front, they had a war going on. They could only allocate a certain number of troops to putting down the Warsaw Ghetto. They weren't going to waste planes that they were busy bombing different fronts to flatten the ghetto. The residents of the ghetto also knew where the basements were. They could go through the sewage canals from building to building. They were guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare generally is very difficult to beat, even if the moral high ground is not with you. Communist guerrillas, ISIS guerrillas, Al Qaeda guerrillas. Terrorist guerrillas. Guerrilla warfare is very, very difficult to beat. And ultimately, the Germans did beat it. So I think you have an overly positive view of what was achieved in the Warsaw Ghetto. But also, it has nothing to do with the moral high ground because, again, it's the conviction that matters. But whether you're right or good, is not the determining factor. Because very evil ideologies, where people really believed in their cause, can fight the good guys for a very long time, if they're willing to engage in the kind of combat the Warsaw Ghetto. And again, the Warsaw Ghetto ultimately was a huge failure. I do not believe the Second Amendment is crucial application of individual rights. It is in a sense of if you interpret it as self-defense, but I don't think that's the interpretation the Founding Fathers had in mind. As a way to prevent tyranny, it's not a good mechanism. The reality is that Americans being armed is not going to prevent dictatorship in America. If dictatorship in America is coming, you're not going to prevent it with your with the guns you haven't hidden in your basement or not hidden in your basement. What are you going to do against F-35s? What are you going to do against, M2 tanks? Not much. Jamie, can you talk about the Kansas experiment, the Laffer curve, and leftist claims that Kansas experiment failed, so the Laffer curve is wrong? The Laffer curve is the idea that as you reduce taxes, revenue actually increases. Because people declare more, people work harder, and the Laffer curve has been proven over and over and over again that at least within a range, it definitely works. So I don't think the Laffer curve in and of itself is much of a thing. I don't remember the details of the Kansas experiment. Kansas lowered taxes in some areas, and revenues plummeted. But I can't remember the details of it. But all I can say is, when you look at the details and you look at people's analysis of it, it did not refute the Laffer curve. But look, I don't think the Laffer curve is that important. I don't want to maximize government revenues. I want to minimize government revenues, and I want to minimize government expenses. I don't place any, none of my ideas are dependent on the Laffer curve working. But I don't think the Kansas experiment was an experiment in the Laffer curve, but I cannot explain why right now, because I looked at it 15 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever, and I can't remember what the details were. Nate, rephrasing my question from the other day, after an activist hedge fund gains control of a company through a hostile takeover, why do they typically then like to do stock buybacks? Is this the pressure management? But I don't understand the question. When a hedge fund gains control of a company, then there's no stock left, right? How do you gain control of a company? By buying its stock. And you typically, when you buy a stock, you have to buy all of it through a tender offer. It's not the case that hedge funds buy 51% of a company. Now, let's say they do. They only buy a certain percentage of it. One of the reasons to do a stock buyback is to get rid of all the cash that this company has maintained, which cannot be invested because these older companies don't have good investment opportunities. The hedge fund or private equity fund wants to return that cash to investors, to the owners, so that they can use that cash to invest. But the company itself, the reason stock buybacks make sense, this is true of any company, is when a company doesn't have investment opportunities that are large enough, investment opportunities that will return, that are profitable enough to justify investing in them. So they take that money and they return it to shareholders. They could do it through a dividend, but dividends are taxed at a relatively high rate, or they can do it through stock buyback, which is only taxed at capital gains rates, which is a significantly lower tax rate, so shareholders appreciate it. So that's the best I can do, given that I don't think you quite. Give me an example would be good, right? An example of a company that was taken over and then did a stock buyback, and I can dig into something. Michael says, who invited you to the debate in San Francisco? Did Christian groups reach out to you? Do you find you're getting recognized more when you travel? It was a friend, an objectivist in San Francisco who reached out to this group, suggested that I come. They knew who I was, and they were eager to do it. And this friend also helped get them a really good-sized audience. This is the same guy who organized my event in San Francisco a year ago. So it was a collaboration between this Christian group and an objectivist, and a few objectivists. Kind of the basically the objectivist club up there, and people do recognize me when I travel. People do recognize me in this thing in San Francisco. People did recognize me. People recognize me. Young people came up to me at the socialism debate, and they were on the left. They were on the socialist side, but they said they knew who I was, and they recognized me from YouTube, from the short videos they see when they scroll through YouTube. So yeah, the word is getting out. It's just people are not agreeing with me necessarily. All right, Lincoln says, lovely. I can't wait to work in a factory in Trump's new manufacturing-based America. I looked at my grandfather working in a literal sheet metal factory and said, that's what I want to make my career. Well, I know Lincoln is being cynical here, but yeah, don't worry, it's not happening. That's the good news. Michael, do we only need 10% of the population to be rational and productive to not have another dark ages? How would objectivism even rise from the ashes of the next one? I don't know what the exact number is, but 10% seems right. Maybe it's 20%, but it's a minority of people. Objectivism will rise from the ashes of the next one because somebody will read Ayn Rand's books, and they will be studied in secret, in basement secrets, and those ideas will slowly be reintroduced into the culture, and it'll take off and dominate. Lincoln, I would say impeach Trump over corruptions for his crypto scheme, but then that would mean President Vance, which is far worse. Yes, but he should be impeached just to make a statement. For the sake of justice, he should be impeached for all the corruption, but he won't be. No way Republicans will do that. He is the most corrupt president in American history. Lincoln, which was 17 years ago, anyone under 35 hasn't been a working adult during a recession, which is not good. Well, I don't know if it's not good. It's good not to have recessions. But given how manipulated our economy is, maybe recessions are valuable because they get to weed out excesses and inefficiencies and unproductiveness. Normative Randroid, thank you for the sticker. I think I thanked everybody else. No. Anyway, Applejack. Yeah, Applejack, thank you for the sticker. I think I got everybody else. All right, Mahadvavish, something like that. Hi, Yaron. Call me M. Okay, M. I cherish your existence. Thank you, M. Heard of ex-Mossad chief Wycorn's book, Sword of Freedom, Politics Awful, Mossad insight's great. Yeah, I mean, the Mossad is a pretty amazing entity in spite of its chiefs often having pretty bad politics and being generally slightly left of center. Paul Coyne, I forgot to give you the $10 I promised yesterday. Well, thank you for doing it now. Jamie, which politician is best option, in your opinion, for next president, and who, not in politics currently, would you like to see run for office? Oh, I don't know. I mean, people have mentioned Jamie Dimon. I think he could run as a Democrat, and I'd vote for him. People have talked about Democrats like, what's his name, the governor of Pennsylvania. I don't think he could win, but somebody like that. On the Republican side, I still like Nikki Haley. I'm sure there are others. The Yokins, the just termed out governor of Virginia, the former governor of Georgia might be pretty good, or the governor that's going to be termed out of Georgia might be pretty good. So probably some, Republican governors. I'm thinking of people who could win, not just random people. I'm sure there's some business leaders who I could be supportive of, but I'd like somebody who's very away from MAGA and very away from the far left, with some executive experience. Stephen Katz, are all environmentalists bad? Don't some of them just want to improve the environment? Well, I don't know what their environment is. We can get into a whole discussion about environment and what that even means. But no, a lot of environmentalists are, are patsies of the intellectuals. They think they might be doing good. They care about clean air and clean water, don't we all? It's the intellectuals who are really, really bad. They're the ones who need to be condemned. So I don't condemn all people who hold environmental views. It's the intellectuals, and it's the people who lead the movement in one way or the other. It's spokesmen, it's funders, it's people like that. Hi, Yaron. What do you think, this is again Stephen Katz, of SAT that test high school students have to take to qualify for admission to most colleges? I mean, I wonder if it's a good test. I don't know. Again, it would be cool to see universities actually developing their own tests and coming up with something more creative than testing everybody the same. And Michael, in a follow-up question or comment, says SATs are actually just IQ tests. There's a high correlation between SATs and IQ tests, although SATs are more topic-related. Look, I'm not against testing. I'm not against testing people's knowledge. I think there's a high correlation between SAT scores and performance in college and success in college. So maybe they're a good measure for college attendance. But I think the whole education system needs to be rethought from scratch. College needs to be different. High school needs to be different. And I think at the end of the day, there'd be a lot less testing in terms of conventional tests. All right, Jamie. Should law-abiding, mentally well people be allowed to carry a sidearm in public for safety and own weapons at home? And can armed population really stop tyranny if government has drones, tanks? No, I don't think an armed population can stop tyranny. I really don't think that is the solution for tyranny. Tyranny is a consequence of ideas, and again, they have drones and tanks and lots of things. It just becomes a civil war, which can be incredibly bloody. Should they be allowed to do it? My general sense is no. It makes the police job very, very difficult to be able to differentiate between law-abiding citizens who are carrying a gun for self-defense and criminals who are carrying a gun because they want to do harm. So I don't think carrying out in the open makes any sense. I think if you carry a concealed weapon, fine, but even concealed weapons, you're taking a risk by carrying it. If you use it, you're going to have to justify its use. If you draw it, you're going to have to justify drawing it. If you draw it, you're going to have to accept that there's a risk that law enforcement will shoot you. I think guns are dangerous, right? And in the hands of a relatively irrational population, they are super dangerous. So I would rather live in just a peaceful place. You know, I'd rather live in a place where I don't feel like I need a gun to protect myself. I don't want to own a gun. I don't want to wear a gun. I don't want to carry a gun. I had a concealed weapons permit in California. I don't want that permit. I never carried because I don't want it. I don't want to risk, any accidents, and I just don't feel comfortable with a gun. A gun is about killing people. I want to live in a place where I'm comfortable traveling and going and doing all this stuff without needing a gun. Linda says, Wyoming is an open carry law and we have a very low crime rate. I would guess that even if Wyoming banned open carry, it would have a very low crime rate. I'm just guessing, but I'm pretty sure it's true. So I'm not big on guns generally, and I'm not big on carrying them all the time. I mean, I would not want to live in a place. I mean, this is, maybe I shouldn't live in Wyoming. I do not want to live in a place where you need to carry a gun to make it safe. Now, Wyoming is already safe, so carrying a gun doesn't cost anything, I guess. But it's not safe because of open carry law. It's safe because of the thin population, the kind of people who are there. Lots of reasons why it's safe. Thoughts on Brian Johnson and the Don't Die movement? I mean, Brian Johnson, my only thought, I mean, he's a bit of a freak and it's a little crazy what he's doing. But on the other hand, let him do it. I'm eager to learn what works and what doesn't. He's a guinea pig. And I don't know what the movement is. The idea of not dying, I'm cool with that. I think that's great if it's achievable. Let's learn from people like Brian Johnson what works and what doesn't, and then do it and apply it to as many people as possible. So I think he's a weird guy, and I've seen documentaries about him and stuff, and he's kind of a weird guy, but he's doing something that'll benefit all of us. And he seems to be enjoying it, seems to value it, so go for it. All right, we've got 8 minutes. We'll see. There might be a few questions I have to wait for tomorrow. Michael says, Democrats in the 1990s, their big government is over. That was Bill Clinton. Democrats today, free stuff 2025. Yeah, but I don't know why you're just saying Democrats. Republicans today, free stuff 2025. I mean, look at Trump, who wants to send us all a check funded with debt for $2,000. Rajiv, Tucker whitewashed Fuentes, Trump whitewashed Tucker. Trump is irredeemably evil. After this, no good action of his will change my verdict of Trump. That's been my verdict of Trump for 10 years, so I'm with you. Kim, should one go to New York City before Mamdani ruins it? No, I mean, sure, go to New York City, but you're going to be fine in New York City after Mamdani's there as well. He's not going to ruin it. New York City's not going to be ruined quickly. And my guess is a year into Mamdani's reign as mayor, you won't see much of a difference. Now, I might be wrong. He might move very fast, and he might ultimately defund the police, even though that wasn't part of his agenda. But we'll see. I wouldn't rush to do it. Go see New York. Bogdan, please answer the dilemma email paid for by PayPal. I'll look for it. I don't remember seeing a dilemma email. Or maybe I did. God, my memory is so frigging bad. I'll look for it. I apologize. All right, Rafael, very good week in M&A. Got 8 offers on my first deal. Cheers, Yaron. Congratulations. That's terrific. Terrific. Rafael's going to be a gazillionaire one day, running a private equity fund. Buying and selling companies, and he's going to become a big time contributor to the Yaron Brook Show. All right. Is it necessary to understand the origin of your irrational emotions to correct them? Can you just recognize why it is irrational and act rationally? Well, certainly you can act rationally. The question is, will you still feel the emotion? You at least need to... I don't know if you have to identify it. Probably not. But you have to really do the work of undoing of trying to figure out what kind of conclusions led to it and trying to undo those. So it takes real work. You shouldn't act based on irrational emotions or emotions based on irrational ideas. But and emotions are never irrational. They just are, right? They're based on irrational conclusions, some of them. But you need to change those conclusions one way or the other. And that takes work. And then, because what you want is not to be confronted with those emotions. Lincoln, in my opinion, the prestigious colleges would accept more people, but would be a lot harder to finish once you get into Harvard and Stanford. It is basically a cakewalk these days. I mean, American universities are easy. I mean, having come from an Israeli university, American universities are generally easy. I don't know if Harvard and Stanford are cakewalks, but they do have great inflation, definitely. I know that in Stanford. So yes, it should be a lot harder. Okay, last question. I like numbers. If we shouldn't rebel to fight tyranny, how can you then say a people are responsible for their own deaths if they let themselves live in tyranny? Oh, I didn't say you shouldn't rebel. I just don't think you should expect to be successful. I mean, you should rebel because you should fight for freedom, but the odds are that you won't prevent freedom by fighting. This is why you should fight the intellectual battle well before it gets to the point where you have to use weapons. Weapons are last resort. Try to fight tyranny before the need for weapons arises. So fight it intellectually, ideologically, before it becomes tyranny. All right. Thank you, everybody. We basically reached our target with $5 off. Maybe someone can step in with $5. But we basically reached our target. I appreciate that. Thank you. We've also reached my hard stop. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody.